In this video, I will rank what I think are the best S-Class generations. The S-Class is the full-sized luxury Mercedes, with a greater focus on comfort and quality compared to Mercedes' smaller cars. A lot of AMG's biggest and most powerful engines have gone into the S-Class over the years. I'm looking at the design of each generation, what AMG models were offered, how they stood up in their time, and their legacy today. This is how I rank them, in my opinion. Number 5. W220. Considering that so many S-Class generations have gained a legendary reputation, the bar is set high and the 220 falls the shortest. Introduced in late 1998, the 220 was smaller, lighter, and less expensive than the previous W140. The two-door version of the S-Class was called the CL during this generation, and it carried its own designation of C215. Lots of new features were introduced, such as air suspension and later ABC active body control hydraulic suspension. Distronic radar-guided cruise control was available as well. The interior was elegant and the seats were very comfortable. As usual for an S-Class, the engine range was vast in Europe with 6 and 8-cylinder diesel engines. But North America received the M112 V6 and M113 V8 at launch. The new M137 V12 was seen early on, but it failed to impress given that it was significantly down on power and reliability compared to its M120 predecessor. AMG initially offered a technical package S55 AMG with 355 horsepower, which later became a series model. Following that, an S63 AMG V12 with 437 horsepower was produced in very low numbers. The facelift brought in big upgrades to the S600 and the AMG models, including a supercharged M113K in the S55 with nearly 500 horsepower. On top of that, there was the 604 horsepower S65 AMG with an even more impressive 738 pound-feet of torque from its bi-turbo M275 V12. The 220 is known to have a few issues, such as rust on earlier models and lots of equipment that can fail. Not to mention the hydraulic suspension on some models being problematic. The 220 isn't a bad car overall. Despite the shortcomings of this generation, the later years were much improved, and cars like this 2006 S65 are still something very special. Number 4. W221. Officially unveiled in 2005, the 221 made its way into the hands of customers over the next few years. This generation focused on a higher quality look and feel compared to its predecessor, and the two-door version at this time was the C216 CL class. Flared fenders were a distinctive part of the 221 styling, and new features such as an infrared night view system were introduced. Again, there were a few diesel options, but a new M273 V8 was added among other engines, as well as most models getting a 7-speed transmission. A very attractive facelift was added for the 2010 model year, as well as updates to the engine lineup, such as a powerful M278 in the S550. The AMG models included a new S63 with the M156 V8 with over 500 horsepower, followed by the M157 bi-turbo V8 with over 530 horsepower for 2011. At the top of the range, the S65 continued with the same V12 engine and transmission as its predecessor. I think the W221 was a strong generation that had its own bold styling and more premium focus. While running one of these cars today will still need money for service, a lot of the systems were improved compared to the 220, such as the hydraulic suspension, if equipped, being more robust. Number 3. W126. Having an incredibly long life cycle of 12 years and nearly 900,000 units made, the 126 is the most popular S-Class ever. The development of this generation was led by trends in the 1970s, such as fuel efficiency and safety. The two-door C126 was referred to as the SEC. The design was a classic Mercedes with a few more rounded edges, which resulted in a more aerodynamic design. Mercedes offered a wide range of engines, including the dependable OM617 turbodiesel, and the range-topping models were powered by the venerable M117 V8. The car was revised in the mid-1980s, including a new, more powerful 5.6-liter M117, which was desperately needed. AMG was very busy with the 126 generation, initially offering minor upgrades to the M117 engine before working their way towards the massively powerful 6-liter 4-valve engines that made their 126 truly special with 380 horsepower. The 126 is a legendary generation, which cemented Mercedes as the authority on longevity and quality. Given the era, most of these cars were underpowered and slow, with the exception being the ECE version of the 560 with around 300 horsepower, and of course the AMG models as well. Being up to over 40 years old means that these cars are going to need care to stay running, but they have really lasted compared to a lot of cars from the 1980s. Number 2. W222. Introduced in 2013, the 222 reimagined the S-Class. Gone were the flared fenders of the 221, and instead the exterior styling was very subtle. Inside, Mercedes made it clear that the S-Class had the best interior compared to any of its competitors. A fantastic design. This generation merged the different body styles back under the S-Class name. You had the new S-Class sedan, coupe or coupe, and the cabriolet. The engine range was mostly carried over from the 221, but there were updates for the facelift, including new inline-six engines and a 4-liter M176 V8, as well as 9-speed transmissions for most models. AMG continued with the M157 in the S63, and then updated to the M177 engine for 2018. The S65 received a few tweaks and modernizations to its V12, but the main change was that the V12s finally got the faster shifting 7-speed transmission instead of the old 5-speed. The S65 was produced right to the end of the line, and it's one of my favorite cars of all time because it combines a V12 engine that us enthusiasts love, put into a car that's still loaded with all the latest features you could ever want. Putting the 222 ahead of the 126 is a big claim, but it deserves its place. Number 1. W140. If any car showcased Mercedes putting engineering over accounting, it was the 140. This was a car that Mercedes had developed for 10 years through delays and cost overruns. Meanwhile, BMW announces the E32 in 1986 with a V12. It didn't matter. Mercedes delayed and released their own V12 with 100 horsepower more than BMW's. Nothing was going to stop the 140 from being the best at its launch in 1991. The best the 140 was, but it was extremely heavy and expensive. From the double pane glass to the soft closing doors, this was a premium car through and through. A good range of engines were offered to put this generation ahead of the underpowered 126. The M119 V8 with 322 horsepower and the M120 V12 with around 400 horsepower were the top offerings. A mid-cycle facelift changed a few things, including the coupe being spun off as a CL class. AMG was getting into full swing with the 140, as the merger with Mercedes happened through the 140's life cycle. A few cars were completed with the 6-liter M119 engines from AMG, putting out 375 horsepower. A tuned version of the S600's 6-liter V12 delivering 440 horsepower was also available. The S72 AMG had a V12 with just over 7 liters, putting out around 500 horsepower. This was followed by an updated S70 with a similar 490 horsepower engine to the S72. Customers such as the Sultan of Brunei demanded the best, and thus the S73T was commissioned with a custom wagon body and a 7.3-liter M297 engine. Power was rated at 565 horsepower in this car. Despite the praise of quality, these are still old cars and problems can come up. For example, earlier 140s up to 1995 suffered from biodegradable wiring harnesses. This was by no means a simple car with lots of equipment, and not to mention it's about 30 years old by now. Nonetheless, the ambition, good engines, extreme AMG models, and the last of an era quality keep the 140 at the number 1 spot. I didn't include the classic models such as the W116, W109 and older because it's harder to compare the older models. But they are undisputed legends in their own right, such as the 6.3 and 6.9 flagship models. I also didn't include the new W223 model because it's still quite new and the AMG models have barely hit the showrooms yet at this time. We'll have to see how this generation ages over the coming years. That's it for this video. Let me know in the comments what you think about this list, or if you think the order should have been different. I've made some more detailed videos on a few of these cars, so I'll leave a link to some of those videos in the description. Thanks for watching. If you want to support the channel, take a look at my store. Link is in the description. If you want to see more Mercedes and AMG content, subscribe for more videos like this one.